Hello and welcome to the Enduring Gardener. Today I'm going to be showing you how and when you should be planting allium bulbs. And I've got a few of them in front of me here in the wheelbarrow, which I want to put into this border here. What I'll be doing is I'll be taking away today that raised bed there, which has had limited success, as is the case often with raised beds. They just tend to get a bit dry. And I'll be taking up this wicker compost heap, which was a temporary measure to get some goodness into the soil there. By taking those away, it's going to create a bit of room away from the competition of plants for these bulbs. Allium bulbs need light, so the theory is by removing those, we're going to be creating open space, and that will get plenty of light come spring. Now, the time of year to be doing this is when the temperature in the soil gets to about 15 degrees Celsius, that's 60 degrees Fahrenheit. It's now September here in the UK, and that's the perfect time to be doing it. And then we'll talk about the types of alliums I'm putting in, how deep they need to be planted, how far apart to space them, and how generally they're going to fit in to the design on this border behind me. Let's get to work. Come in here. So we got it out, bit of action on the way. We saw a newt, thankfully it was okay, relocated it close by, somewhere safe. The soil here, as you might expect, underneath a raised bed is dry as a bone. It's not very good either. Whilst I'm here, I'm going to get this euphorbia out, which is a few years old now and past its best. They generally don't last very long. Bulbs, like alliums, generally like free draining soil. So I'm breaking up any clay clods that are in this soil. I might put some gravel in there too, particularly around the area I'm planting the bulbs. And I'm going to put a bit of compost off the compost heap in there, just to give it a bit of organic matter. Finally, the other thing I'm going to do is sprinkle in a bit of blood, fish and bone, just to get some nutrients in there. Picking out the odd stone as I'm doing it, but I'm quite happy now with the prep on that soil. So let's get these allium bulbs in. I've got two types. This is a white one called Mount Everest, and this is a sort of classic purple one, purple sensation. I'm going to put predominantly purple with the odd splash of white. Now, one way of doing this is to sort of lay them out on top of the soil, and that's what I'm going to do for the purpose of showing you the sort of spacing I like to put on them. They tend to say keep them 20 centimetres apart, but I like to plant in kind of clumps. So I'm going to put them in threes, not quite 20 centimetres apart, maybe there's 10 or 15 centimetres between them. And I'll mix up the odd white one in there too. So it'll be 2 purple, 1 white per clump. And I reckon this kind of space, you can see how it's sort of shaping up here. We'll get at least 4 or 5 clumps of 3 in there. So that's the spacing there. We've got 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18 bulbs in that space. That should make a good display. Now, the trick is to resist planting anything on top of them that might repress their growth. Something like an agapanthus might fit in here, maybe over there, because they tend to put on growth later in the season, so it won't disrupt the alliums. In fact, that growth will come through when the leaves for the alliums are dying back. So there will be some sort of succession planting going on. But in the main, I'll be resisting planting anything in there that might stop them getting the light they need. The front of the border here, there is actually some marjoram that will creep that way in the future, but I think the alliums should be strong enough. There'll be enough strength in these bulbs to push through beyond the marjoram and forge their own way up. The general advice is to plant a bulb 3 or 4 times its depth or its width. So the widest, take the widest dimension. So let's say that is 2.5 inches. It needs to go about, if it were 3 times its depth, 7.5, 4 times its depth, 10 inches deep. Well, how deep is that? That spade is probably a foot, so it's probably about so deep. So that's how deep they'll go. You don't have to be too scientific about it, but generally speaking, the bigger the bulb, the deeper it goes. It's important to spend the time sussing out which end is the root end. I'm facing that downwards. Should be fairly obvious. They tend to have a few dried up roots. One other tip for you here, if you can see your bulbs have got a smaller bulb forming on the outside, then put that on the outer edge where it can expand into space. So in this instance, there's not much growing here, so that little bulb can face outwards. Therefore, it's got room to grow there in the future. I'm happy with that. Money has been invested and it's in the gardening bank, and hopefully in a matter of months, come spring, we'll be rewarded with flowers. I'm going to do much the same thing further up this border. That means there'll be splashes of colour repeated along the length of the border. That's a little garden design trick for you. Repetition of the same plant, and there is probably enough to put some in the border over there too. To summarise, the best time of year to be planting spring flowering bulbs like alliums is September, October time, when that soil temperature is down below around 15 degrees Celsius, that's 60 Fahrenheit. They should be spaced 20 centimetres apart, that's about 8 inches. I like to put mine in clumps of 3, odd numbers tend to work best. They're buried about 8 inches deep too, in free draining soil. So that's all from the Enduring Gardener. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.